I feel in general, it's very hard to build a set that feels real. You know, when you walk around in the world in real life, everything's a little wonky and wrong. Why is there a bump in the wall? Why isn't the ceiling straight? Why is the paint doesn't match here? That's just the real world. And to me, what I am so excited about with that set is I feel we did it.
Hi, and welcome back to StudioBinder Academy. I'm Brandon. Today, we're speaking with award-winning production designer Jason Kisvarday, whose previous work includes Swiss Army Man, Sorry to Bother You, Palm Springs, Everything Everywhere All at Once, and many more. Jason, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now, to start off with, we want to get your filmmaking origin story. Could you tell us what inspired you to become a filmmaker, your first jobs, how you got started?
Yeah, that wasn't my plan. In the beginning, I went to business school and I had a series of jobs out of college, all in marketing and internet e-commerce and, very 9 to 5, 401k, got a parking spot kind of jobs. And I hated it and I didn't know what I didn't like about it. I took a year off. I went traveling and said I wasn't going to come back home until I figured out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, and went on a whole long adventure. But the gist of it was I realized what I didn't like about that traditional working world was the routine and the schedule. And I wanted to find something that, where each day maybe was a little bit different and there were more challenges in my day-to-day life. And it maybe even a little more unpredictability. And I grew up here in Los Angeles, and the film industry has always just been around. I just never thought it was something that I would wind up doing. It actually, in fact, it always seemed, like the circus travels through town and you sit there and go, man, it would really be fun to join the circus, and the circus leaves. But you never think that you could actually join the circus. And to me, that's what the film industry was. It was always here. It just wasn't, it was a magical thing and it's mysterious and nobody really knows how to get into it anyway. It's secret handshakes and all behind closed door hush hush stuff. I came back home from that trip and I started PAing, which is, if anyone doesn't know the jobs, it's the lowest position on a production, and it stands for production assistant. And we joke that it stands for possibly anything, because they'll ask you to do really possibly anything. And that was how I got started.
Excellent. I'll be honest with you. I think this is probably my favorite part of the interview because, you get to hear everyone's stories, and everyone's story is so different. And, you see everyone from every walk of life making it in the industry, what we're all trying to do. And so it's such amazing to hear your story and every other filmmaker's story. It's just so inspiring to me. Now, speaking of that, was there anything that drew you to production design specifically, or did you just kind of happen into it?
No. So I started PAing on sets, and I remember the first day being there, and it's the circus, and I'm standing in the corner, I don't know, the equivalent of shoveling elephant poop, thinking, I made it to the circus and this is wonderful. This is exactly where I want to be. I'm not doing the job I want to be doing, but I'm in the right place. Finally, I found it. And I spent all of my time, several years as a PA, hanging out with different departments. I would go hang out with the camera department and talk to them and learn about the gear and see what their day-to-day routine was. I'd hang out with the grips, with the electrics, the costume department, production, which was very similar to the world that I had come from, where it was a little more of an office job and paperwork and that sort of thing. And I didn't gravitate immediately towards the art department because a lot of the job, especially on commercials, tends to be it's a lot of moving furniture. And I saw that's more what I saw. And I thought, maybe one of these other jobs is more for me. And eventually I think I saw what the art department really did, and that I felt they were challenged more with a different day-to-day set of tasks than the other department. The camera department, every department is difficult. The camera department comes in, they set up their camera, they do their thing. And sometimes, there are interesting twists and turns. The art department, every day, it's just bonkers. Anything that's not really a costume or a camera or production, all the other stuff tends to fall in, on the shoulders of the art department. And it can be anything from moving furniture to building something on top of a mountain, or, coming up with some sort of roller skates for an elephant. It's anything. And those are the challenges that drew me towards that department. And that job is I got excited about the twists and the turns and the challenges of it all. That was exciting to me.
Definitely. I personally love a challenge myself. So I think we have a very similar mindset, I believe.
Yeah.
Now I want to backtrack a little bit. With all those duties and everything, how would you describe what a production designer does?
So very, very broad strokes, what a production designer is in charge of the art department. If you look at it as a pyramid, the production designer would be the head of the art department. And then I would be supported by, depending on the size of the project, it's scalable. On a small project, it might be me plus a person or two. On some of my earliest projects, it was just me. I was the art department, and I built the sets and did the props and, the triangle. There's not even a triangle. There's just a person there. But on a bigger project, I'm in charge of the whole art department. And that includes staffing up the department. That includes when other departments want to communicate with any part of my department. A lot of times that will either go through me directly or an art director, but very rarely will somebody from another department come in and just start talking to people on my team, because that information can get lost in the mix. So I'm kind of a conduit or the figurehead of the art department. If the director wants something, they'll come to me, and then I'll turn around and communicate that to the rest of my team and, keep record of it and make sure that that information is getting to the right people. And then conversely, it goes the other way. When my team has questions, comments, or concerns, they'll filter that to me, and then I'll go out and communicate that to, the DP or the director or the costume designer, and funnel the information properly. So a lot of my job, if I was going to really condense it down to one thing, it's communicating between my department and other departments. But that's my job specifically, is I'm the head of the art department and handle everything like that.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I could see it turning into, if you have all these people talking at once, you have this game of telephone going on. A piece of information gets relayed to one person, and then a different piece of information gets relayed to another person. So having that point person, I can see, can be very advantageous.
Yeah, it becomes a hot, buttery mess real fast.
Now, looking back at your body of work, you've worked on some really great films, Swiss Army Man being one of my favorites. Now, when it comes to choosing projects, is there anything in particular that you're looking for in the script before signing on?
Yeah, I'm very particular about projects that I jump on. The first thing, I'll read the script and I'll get all the way through it. And the first thing I think to myself is, is this something that I personally want to watch? Not even do I want to watch it? Am I excited to watch it? Do I see the trailer and go, I'm dropping everything. I'm buying a ticket day number 1 in the theaters to go see this thing. That's something I want to work on. And if that isn't my gut reaction, I start looking at other reasons why this is maybe a special project. So that's number 1. That's what I'm looking for. And most of the projects, all of the projects I've worked on, that happened to some degree where I read that and thought immediately, I want to go see this movie. But then number 2, it's, things that are red flags are reboots, sequels, or if it's something that's just not bringing anything new to a genre or filmmaking in general. If I can read a script and I almost immediately go, okay, this is a rehash of this and that story, and it's been done before, and I've worked on things like that here and there, and sometimes they're just not exciting to work on. And when it's not that exciting, tend not to do my best work. So for me, what I've learned is I need to personally be very excited about the material and the project before I attach myself to it, because I know that if I'm excited, I'm going to do my best work, because that's all I can think about when I go home every night. And I'm eating dinner, I'm thinking about the project and brainstorming new ideas, and I'm excited about it. And it's very hard to stay excited about a project that you weren't excited about to begin with.
Definitely. Yeah, I definitely have some experiences like that. Sometimes you take a project to do a project because you might not be doing anything at the time. And then sometimes you do projects because you have to do them, and it's just like something you need to do. So I can definitely feel that sentiment. Now, having worked with many filmmakers from the Daniels to DP Larkin Sepul, as far as the collaborative process goes, is there an ideal relationship between yourself, the production designer, and the other departments, such as the director or cinematographer?
Yes. My ideal working relationship with either a director or any department head is that it's meant to be collaborative, where, in a perfect world, every person that joins the team is good and strong at what they do and is bringing value to the project. And in a perfect world, my relationship with the cinematographer would be, they're excellent at their job, I'm excellent at my job, and we're working in tandem to make something extraordinary. Where I think it doesn't work is when people aren't playing nice with each other and people are coming in and maybe bullying and an agenda. It's something I like to do with my own department. I'm able to do most of the jobs in my entire department, not necessarily well, but I understand the job and I've done it a little bit, but I purposely hire the best people that are available at that moment in time that are way better at me than doing, at any of these projects. Like, I can do graphic design, but I always bring in somebody who's way better than me because it makes all of us look good. And when somebody from another department is overstepping their bounds too much, it's hindering my process and my department's ability to do their job the best they can. And again, I think it's finding this perfect balance between the director, the DP, the costume designer, the production design team, everybody, to enable everybody to show up and do their best job possible. So that's kind of a woo-woo answer to your question, but It's
No,
that's what I'm.
it totally makes sense. It goes back to that saying, life imitates art, and life is all about balance. And that collaborative balance, it's key
Yeah,
on a film set. Like you said, you may have somebody overstepping their boundaries, which is
yeah.
hindering another department, and it's only going to slow the entire production down. So it totally makes sense.
And I'll give you a quick example. If imagine the DP is it comes down to communication, but imagine the DP is looking at we're shooting on a street at night and it's a little bit dark, and the DP says, you know what, we really need some lights in the background to add a little twinkle, and I'm shooting on this lens at this f-stop and et cetera, et cetera. But instead of dictating to me, hey, I want you to go get this light, it's always better to communicate and say, this is what I'm after. Can you pitch some ideas? Because if they dictate to me something overly specific, unless there's a reason for it, it's going to prevent me from bringing other ideas to the table that might be better. So to me, the ideal working relationship is always communicate what the desired effect is, but then don't over communicate or over dictate, because
Mhm.
you might not wind up with the best solution. You'll wind up with the solution that you thought was best, but that's why you hire these people who know what they're doing to bring these interesting and fresh hot takes to the table.
Totally. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to jump into the stages of production from the point of view of a production designer. Could you tell us generally what your pre-production process looks like?
So pre-production for me, I'm usually one of the first people hired on a job. So they'll open up the production offices. You have the line producer and the production team is starting up. And I'm usually one of the first people in after that. A lot of jobs, movies specifically, in television shows, longer format things, there are some unknowns heading into the beginning of the project that are going to influence the schedule and the budget and the logistics and creative side of it as well. Like, are we building this set or are we finding it in the world? Are we, is this even possible? Does this need to be a VFX shot? Is this green screen? Can we really do that practically? So the very early stages of pre-production are me coming in, maybe doing some scouting they'll bring in the location scout early to, go out with myself and the director. The DP may or may not be involved this early on, depending on the project. But the first chunk of time is, a lot of creative and logistical conversations about just that, logistics. How are we going to make this movie? What's the best way to move forward? And once we come up with a loose game plan, more people start getting hired and brought in, because bringing them in before that doesn't make sense. It would say, hey, we brought in the construction coordinator, but we don't know if we're building sets or not yet. We're still figuring that out. Bringing in, so that's usually the first start of the beginning of pre-production.
Okay. All right. And on average, I know every production is probably different, but on average, how long is your pre-production process?
For a movie, 6 to 8 weeks is about normal for an indie movie.
Okay. And are there specific kind of tentpole dates that you're looking to hit within that pre-production stage?
It's every project is a little different. And that said, I've done some projects where the pre-production was even shorter. But it depends what it is. So for example, if we're doing a lot of construction, we will start early on jamming out floor plans and designs so that we can get construction underway, because that takes a chunk of time. And also this might come down to the schedule. Hey, Jason, we've got a couple big sets and because of certain reasons, we need to shoot those first. So again, we'll communicate and identify what we'll prioritize our pre-production. Like, what do we need to get jamming on first? Because my whole job is deadline driven. It's, once they come out with the schedule and they say, this is the day we're going to shoot this, that's the day we're shooting that, that doesn't, I don't want to say it doesn't move, but I have to assume that's not going to move, and I need to back into that deadline. So
Okay.
again, very early on, we'll have some broad stroke logistics conversations that will influence the schedule that gets made. And once that schedule gets made and locks in, and it's not always ideal for me, I'll give them, I'll give the AD department my wish list of when we shoot everything. And that's not how it usually shakes out. So once I get that schedule back, I go back to my team and say, okay, this is priority, second priority, third priority. Let's make a calendar. So each project is a little bit different for those reasons, but typically, it really is just backing into deadlines and when do you need this thing and when do you need that thing. So when that changes our pre-production process.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Now, I was wondering if you can maybe give us an example from one of your projects, as far as prepping the script. Upon that initial read, what is it that you're looking for?
So when I first read a script, it's like whenever you read a book or a script, I see the movie in my head how I imagine it. And maybe I saw some reference images that the director provided, or they have a lookbook or something like that. But I'm reading the script and not just creatively I'll usually read the script the first time and just creatively imagine, what do I think this world should look like? Mm-hmm. Then I'll go back and read it and I start figuring out, how are we going to do this? And I'll go through each scene and it'll be, I don't know, it could be something as simple as an apartment. And I go, well, what are we doing in the apartment? Can we shoot this in a real apartment? Are we doing things that, that's going to be an impossible apartment to find? And immediately my knee jerk reaction is, we need to build that. Or are there sets that are just wild, fantastical things where I know that that's not something that we can find, and absolutely we have to build that. And those are weird red flags. Like, I've read scripts where, there's a moment where it'll call out something that I know is it's going to be extremely expensive or very logistically difficult or even dangerous. And I'll raise a flag when I come across that and say, hey, everything looks great. This is all pretty straightforward, but here are three things we need to talk about immediately, to figure out, do we want to spend the money and really do this? Or number two, can we even afford to do this? Is this something in the project, in a few projects in the past, these red flags have come up and they've changed the creative, where they say, you know what, we didn't realize that this was such a big deal. It's not that important to the story. Why don't we just cut it out? I go, okay, well, that's one way to do it. Or lean into it and say, yeah, this is really important, and let's start talking about it now and budgeting for it and set aside the resources we need because this isn't coming out of the script. So those are the first things that I look for in, first and a second read in a script. It's creative. And then the second one is I put on the logistics hat and figure out, how are we going to make this?
That makes sense. It makes sense that someone on the set should have that hat on, because not every creative is very logistical.
Yeah.
Now, you've worked on some pretty fantastical sets. Was there any one script in particular that presented more challenges than the others?
Yeah, I was going to say, Sorry to Bother You was a difficult one. And for the same reason that several other projects I worked on were difficult, but it was, the creative ideas that Boots came up with were wonderful. And he really wanted to try to stick to that script as closely as possible and not cut stuff out. So what I did on that is something I hadn't really done before, which was I said, we're going to do all of this stuff, and if it kind of falls apart around the edges and it's a little, paper mache-y, or, we're going to paint the room and we don't really have the time to do it properly, but let's just get the colors on the wall. We did a lot of that, and it created an interesting vibe in the movie that, to me, when I watch it, I cringe, because I can point to all the, the mistake. I don't, not even mistakes, but where it is a little rough around the edges, and people I've spoken with say, "Oh no, that's just, that's the world building and that's the vibe." And I said, "No, it's because we had no money, but we weren't willing to, cut stuff or cut ideas." And it was, I think at the time, I wasn't always super happy with how it turned out. But looking back in retrospect, I'm really happy that we did that, because the movie has that vibe, and the world feels vibrant and full. And it really was done on, a micro budget, shoestring, movie film budget, but that was it. But at the time, it was really hard, and people got frustrated, and we did it. And I think, that said, I think everybody was excited about it once it was done, but the process was, a little more grueling than I wish it were.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, I've been on sets that have been like that, and for it, I think we've coined a term of your happy accident of not having the budget to paint the entire wall. But thinking back of it now, watching the film, it added so much to the story. I believe, like it fed into the story of this character, and it was phenomenal.
I like to call it the most fun I never want to have again. But I say that a lot. So that's not just that movie. It's a lot of projects that it was fun while we were doing it. And then we came out the other side and thought, that was, I say that
like,
about
we made
all
it,
the music
now we don't
videos.
have to do it again.
Yeah. Most fun I never want to have again.
Now, going back a little bit, you mentioned scouting. When it comes to scouting, is a production designer involved in both the location and tech scout?
Yes. So and this said, I haven't worked on really, really big studio movies. So it might be different, but in the, the world that I've been living in, which is indie features and commercials, I'm on all the scouts. So I'm on all the director scouts and the tech scouts. That said, on the tech scouts, I have more of my team with me. Depending on what is being seen at that location, we might have, the carpenters or the construction lead might be there. The property master is there. The set decorator is there. The art director or art directors will be there. But on the early scouts, it's usually just me going on them. And that's when the initial creative and logistic conversations are happening. But by the time we go back out and do the tech scout, a lot of it has been figured out, and it's more taking everybody to show them, this is what we're actually doing. We're going to come here. We're going to put a ladder there. You're going to park over there. And this is where the thing is happening. So there is quite a bit of stuff that happens between the early scouts and the tech scout. But so far, traditionally, I've been on all of them.
Now, I had seen in behind the scenes of Everything Everywhere All at Once, there was that one office building that was used for multiple locations. Now, for something along those lines, when you're on that location scout, what is it that you're looking for? Were there particulars that you must-haves or red flags that this is not going to work?
So for Everything Everywhere All at Once, they knew that we were going to shoot a lot in this office building, and they had a wish list of things that, beyond just the offices, are there any other sets that we could shoot in this same space? So we did look at multiple office buildings, and one of the things that everybody liked about the place that we did wind up shooting is it was huge. And there were very few restrictions as far as shooting there because it wasn't an active office building. There were some spaces that we looked at where this floor of the building is empty and available for us, but the rest of the building is occupied. And the elevators are also being used by all the other tenants at the same time. And you can only park in this part of the parking lot. With the building that we shot in for the movie, it was giant, it was empty, and there were also extra spaces. So in the building, when it was an active building, they had a giant cafeteria that fed everybody working there that was now empty. And we walked in there on the Scout and thought, this is a soundstage. We can build sets in here. And then even out in the parking lot is huge. We can park everything here, all the trucks, all the cars. We can base camp out of here. And some of the other locations we shot at were really close to there, but we used that parking lot as a base camp, as opposed to picking up and moving the whole production somewhere to do a day of shooting at a different spot. So, creatively, and then I think they even rewrote some scenes around that building once they saw the building and that giant atrium with the staircase in the middle, and thought, well, if we're going to shoot here, let's just lean into this and embrace it for what it is. So that, and that's something that they're very good at. The Daniels are creative problem solving, but also not being overly rigid about every detail. And that's something that I've seen hurt other projects, are sometimes when you're overly rigid about certain details that maybe aren't important to the story, but you're hung up on them for whatever reason, that can become really expensive, slow down the production. And there's typically a finite budget on any production. And if you pull money from one place, it's not that more money will show up. It's, well, now that money's just gone and it's not there for this other cool thing you were wanting to do. Anyway, so to answer your question, yeah, that's what we were looking for. We were looking for what's the coolest looking office space that'll let us do all the stuff we wanted to do, and bonus if there was more space or more things we could get out of that location. And that's how we picked it.
Definitely. And you definitely did. From what I hear, you used the space for dressing rooms and everything. Like, there were no trailers. Everyone had their own dressing room in the studio. You built a studio essentially.
We didn't have proper offices for the production. So we started pre-production, I think, in a shared office space I think it was, we started pre-production in some offices, then we moved to another office facility, and the entire art department was in a room, I think about the size of this room, and sitting side by side in desks. It was silly. And then they opened up the office building and said, you can go start prepping over there and getting the sets ready, about 6 weeks before we started shooting. And the whole art department said, well, why don't we just set up over there? So the art department up and moved because there were cubicles and offices everywhere. And once we did that, almost every department all then left their production spaces and moved into that office. So it wasn't even just, almost every department was set up in this office building, and it was really fantastic. And it's something that I've since then proposed to other productions. I said, hey, I worked on this one thing where we were all in the same building. We had the costume department, hair, makeup, props, art department, construction, production. Everybody's in the same building, and that's where all the locations are, and that's where we're building sets. And while we were there, even shooting, at lunchtime, we could grab this is how they used to do it on the studio backlots, which I wish more people shot on. But we could grab the directors and the DP at lunch and walk them into the apartment set that's in the middle of construction and say, hey, we're at this crossroads. This window looks like it's a little too low. Should we move it up a few inches? Because we know you have that shot that does this. Oh, yeah. Move the window up a few inches. And we were able to just work more efficiently and come up with wonderful creative solutions to things on the fly because people were there and available. And that was something that this location enabled us to do that I hadn't been able to do on past productions, and with moderate success on productions since then.
Yeah, that's so amazing, because creativity doesn't sleep. It can hit you at any point. And I'd seen in a previous interview, you equated that set almost to like a filmmaking summer camp. And I couldn't imagine a more fun time.
That's a perfect description of it, because it felt like summer camp because everybody was there all day, every day together. And again, a lot of film shoots aren't like that for different reasons. It doesn't make sense. Hey, we're shooting one day at the beach and then we're on top of a building, and it feels a little more disjointed and you bump into somebody you haven't seen in 3 weeks. We were all there all day, every day for weeks and weeks and weeks, but in a wonderful way.
That's so amazing. I hope I get to experience something like that in my career at some point.
I now hope moving on
again. Well, so you can see here, folks, everyone's always chasing that dream. So always keep that. Now, moving on from pre-production, could you tell us your general day-to-day task list during production for a production designer?
Day-to-day task list. Usually I like to show my job starts becoming more and more of an office job. Once I equate it to the movie Fight Club, where at first there's one weirdo standing there with an idea, and you bring in a couple more people, and then there are 5 people, and you turn around one day and there's a room full of people. You might not even know who all of them are, but they're reiterating things that you said 3 weeks ago, indoctrinating the other people who just joined yesterday, and it takes on a life of its own. And these ideas and plans that you came up with early on are now being executed by the team that you've slowly built. So as that progresses, my job tends to be more and more hands-off and becomes more of a managerial role where I'm overseeing and making sure that all of these things are being done properly. As we talked about, when problems come up, I'm able to swoop in and help problem solve, or if there are changes coming in, I come in and filter those changes through my department and make sure that those are absorbed and we're adapting to what's happening. But that, usually I try to get in early before things get too crazy, answer a dumb amount of emails, and then look at what's happening on any given day. Like, are we building sets today? Okay, I'm going to make sure to go down and do a walkthrough if, time permitting. We have a meeting with, the picture car coordinator today. So there tends to be a lot of meetings, continued scouting. And then a lot of times traditionally we'll focus on prepping the first things that are coming up in the shoot. And oftentimes we wouldn't have planned everything through the whole shoot. Again, there's usually not enough time. So the whole first half of the shoot, I might still be wrapped up in planning and prepping the second half of the shoot. So even in prep, we're prepping. I'm more overseeing. Once we start shooting, then it shifts a little bit to I'll visit sets, I'll open up sets to make sure everybody's happy, everything's good, I'll leave, head back to the office, and continue to oversee the future sets that we're still putting together and working on. And I know this wasn't the question, but as we get towards the end of the shoot, I have less and less to do, and I tend to visit set more and more often. And by the last day of the shoot, I'm packing up my little office and getting ready to walk away from the project.
Okay, excellent. Now, we touched on it a little bit earlier of your team that is under your purview. What does the communication between you and the rest of your department look like, whether they be on set or in the office?
There's, as far as me communicating with my own team, a lot of it, a big part of it is visual, where it will be sharing and organizing reference images. Because I feel, it's one thing to verbally tell somebody something. It's even another thing to write something down in words, but with photographs, you can really convey a very specific idea. This is the patina that we want on it. This is the vibe of the room, even if you're having difficulty articulating what it is that you want, and what we'll do a lot of times is share images or have shared, mood boards or photo pages, and just sit together in a room and talk, and we'll talk about images and try to identify together, why is this working? Why does this look good? You know what? I thought it was this, but it's actually the combination of these two colors is so interesting. Even though we're doing a completely different set, let's do a similar thing because it'll bring that vibe into the space. So there's that. And then the other side of communicating is lots of spreadsheets and lists. Punch lists, to-do lists, and staying extremely organized. Calendars, labor calendars, pickups and drop-off lists. So those are the two main types of communication. It's, creative conversations that are mostly that I like doing images, and the logistics side of communicating, which again is a lot of like online spreadsheets and emails and text messages, but trying to keep a workflow that's not too scattered. I prefer, I like to tell everybody, put it in an email, CC all the right people. Let's have a record of everything. And I like to try to keep text messages, there's like a level of escalation. If it's something formal and there's a hot second to respond to it, please put it in an email. If you need an answer pretty darn quick, send me a text message. If it's an emergency, call me. But to send everything via text message, it isn't the most efficient way to do things. And by the same token, sending everything by email doesn't make sense. Sending an email that says, hey, I need an answer in 30 seconds to this thing. I'm going, I've got, 47 new emails in my inbox. If you need an answer in 30 seconds, just call me. And so it's prioritizing types of communication is also part of communicating.
Yeah, and I would imagine, like you said earlier, it was much easier on Everything Everywhere All at Once because everyone was all in one place at once.
All the time.
Now, from all your projects, you've worked on many sets. Is there one in particular that you're just very proud of?
The one One that I feel was very meaningful to me was in Everything Everywhere All at Once, and it was the apartment set. And what I feel that we did successfully, I feel in general, it's very hard to build a set that feels real. People do it all the time, but you start with a box, and a box looks like a box, and then you add the windows and you add some stuff, but beyond that, when you walk around in the world in real life, everything's a little wonky and wrong. Why is there a bump in the wall? Why isn't the ceiling straight? Why is the paint doesn't match here? That's just the real world. And when you build a set, typically you make everything perfect. The paint is perfect. Everything is perfect right angles. All the drapes match and the hardware matches and all the screws are painted over properly. So to me, I love having the time to go in and you build a set and then you go, okay, now let's make this real. And because we built that set in a location that we had access to for a couple months, we had weeks and weeks we built the set, and then we sat and looked at it, and then we went in and did a layer of scenic painting, and we looked at it some more because we had the time to do this. And again, this is like a very scrappy project, and this was a total luxury to have this time, but we added layers and layers and layers. And to me, what I am so excited about with that set is I feel we did it. We made it feel a little over the top, but it felt, to me, standing in the space. And it was fun bringing people in there for the first time who hadn't seen the set. From the outside, it looked like any other set with flats and jack stands holding it up in sandbags. And the second you walked through that front door, it felt like somebody's apartment, and it felt good standing in the space. And to me, it's hard to do that. I feel we did it successfully. Again, with a very limited budget and resources. And that's the one right now I'm the most proud of.
And you definitely should be. It's an amazing film. And if I'm correct, that's what you won the Production Design Award for?
Yes.
Yes. That it had such a lived-in quality that you don't see in movies, because I'm sure they didn't have the time like you had to give it that living quality. But yeah, it was such a phenomenal set piece. And that was one of the sets that you built in the cafeteria of that location. Is that correct?
Yep. So in the cafeteria, that apartment set took up most of the space in there. Most of the space in there. And the other set we built in there was the motorhome. So when they're in the Alphaverse and the back of the laundry delivery motorhome is their headquarters, and they've got headsets and they're bouncing around, we built that shell to film inside of, because the real one was just a mess in there, and there wasn't room for a camera, and so that took up the other 20% of the space in that cafeteria.
Now, speaking of Everything Everywhere All at Once and the low budget hacks that we've kind of coined, I heard there was a scene with the cubicles, but there wasn't enough money to put computers on each of the desks. And so you kind of had to make it look like that. Do you have any other hacks that you've used in your films that you could relay to us?
Yeah, so that exact one we borrowed from Sorry to Bother You, because we had the exact same problem where we didn't have enough computers. And on that one, we tried the idea of printing out spreadsheets on a laser printer and just taping them to the monitor, and it looked great. So we did that same thing. The other thing that we tried, and I actually wanted to push it a little harder, but we didn't. Years and years ago, I met up with Bob and Dennis Skotak, who are old school practical effects, miniature, visual effects artists who've worked on every cool thing ever made. And I was just a young ding dong and walked in there, and they were showing me some of the things they had built. And he showed me a miniature set of a building, and there was a car parked in front of the miniature set. And I grew up as a big model kit nerd, and I'm looking at that car in my mind, knowing they never made a model kit of that car. I said, what's the deal with that car? He said, oh, it's just a photograph of a car that we photographed a car, took the print, cut it out, and glued it to a piece of cardstock, and that's just 2-dimensional. And I remember that was almost 20 years ago, and I remembered that. And we, again, in the office, were running out of money and time to do stuff. So the one thing we did use that trick on is there are bulletin boards in the background on the walls, 4 foot by 8 foot bulletin boards with paperwork tacked to it. So we did one in Photoshop, printed them out, and I can't remember. We had 5 or 6 of these just printouts of a bulletin board, but it had all the texture and the shadows and the patina. So it looked, it didn't look like a collage. It looked like it was a photograph of a bulletin board. And we were able to, so anytime we're in the office and we want to look over here, we would quickly grab all that stuff, and you could just stick it to a wall with double stick tape instead of having to drill into the wall and hang an actual bulletin board. I wanted to take it a step further and actually do 2-dimensional set dressing, like photocopiers, and we wound up not doing it. Future project, that's the move, 2-dimensional set dressing. So I didn't get to do it on that one, but we did a little bit, but not as much as I was hoping.
Now, I'm sure as a production designer, you've snuck some Easter eggs into some of your projects. Is there any Easter egg out there that somebody hasn't quite spotted yet?
Let's see.
Because I did hear about, was it Taxi the Pterodactyl?
There's Taxi the Pterodactyl. So in Everything Everywhere All at Once, we were scouting, very early scout, and the DP Larkin, who's hilarious, made a joke about, wouldn't it be funny if the IRS had a mascot? I don't know, Taxi the tax pterodactyl. And I thought it was hilarious and said, Larkin, we're putting that in the movie. He said, no, that's a stupid idea. Don't put it in the movie. So in every single set in the IRS building, there are Taxi the Pterodactyl posters. So there's a mail sorting room, and it will, it's in the background, and it says Taxi says, and it's spelled PTAXI for like a pterodactyl. Watch out for suspicious packages in the washroom where Deirdre grabs the pipe and smashes Evelyn. There's one on one on the wall that talks about washing your hands. So but that said, Larkin hated them, and I think he purposely threw them out of focus or tried to frame them out. But in almost every set in that movie, and they're always the same. It's a turquoise poster with a yellow pterodactyl on it, but you'll see the shape, or you'll catch it. And I think in some behind the scenes footage, you might actually get a better view of what some of these posters say. So that was us having fun, and you could consider that an Easter egg as well.
All right. Well, excellent. Thank you. Now, to wrap up, do you have any general tips or advice for anyone that may be working in the art department for the first time or looking to get started as a production designer?
So for the first question, advice I've given a lot of people, which may or may not be good advice, but it's advice that I take myself. It's to differentiate yourself. Everybody has strengths and weaknesses in life, and even creatively, I feel everybody has strengths and weaknesses. As a production designer, you're meant to bring ideas to the table, to bring a vibe to the project. And can I do a medieval castle movie? Sure, I can do the research. I can show up and do the thing. Is that where my, hopes and dreams lay in the world of medieval castle architecture and set dressing? No, I'm actually not interested in it at all. I could do it as a job, but wouldn't you love to have the production designer who is passionate about that do your castle movie? And to me, I think a lot of every production designer can also be a generalist. It's the job. You can show up, do the research, do the thing. But the advice I've been giving people is, to differentiate yourself from the pool of all the other production designers. Why would somebody pick you to do a project, especially maybe if you're just getting started and you don't have a big body of work or a resume that has something the director is excited about? Lean into your own personal aesthetic and your own personal interests, and try to stand out from the crowd. And maybe even, this is other advice that I give people and that I take myself is chase projects and not paychecks. Where, imagine you are the castle person and you're really excited about medieval things, and two projects land on your doorstep. One of them is this medieval castle project that pays garbage, or a super lucrative cat food commercial. Take the castle movie, get that on your resume, knock it out of the park, and the next time somebody's doing that type of project, they're going to search through IMDb and see who did the last project with that type of content. And you have a much better chance of getting hired for that thing that you're good about, and you're passionate about. And that's something I tell people. As far as other advice, just getting started, work with as many different people as you possibly can. Getting work in the film business is all about, they say it's who you know. And I remember early on thinking how smarmy that sounded. Like, oh, my uncle's in the biz and that's how I got in. And there's some of that. But if you look at that in a less smarmy way, it's, I get hired based on who I've worked with before and people that I know. And they say, we need a production designer. Hey, I worked with that Jason guy. He wasn't the worst. Try giving him a call. And that's the catch-22 is, well, how do you, what came first, the chicken or the egg? How do you get your name out there and get on your first project if you haven't done a project before? And this is where I say, go back as far as you need to. If you need to start at zero and work for free on your friend's weird dinosaur stop animation movie in their backyard, do it. You have to start somewhere. Try to work on stuff that shows off your what you're passionate about and what you're good at. Work with as many, a lot of early projects I worked on were bad, low budget projects. And at the time, I remember thinking that was a waste of time. Nothing's ever going to come from this. And 7 years later, I get a phone call from somebody who was a person working on that remembered me, and we loosely stayed in touch. But you're building the foundation for the rest of your career. And the bigger and more solid the foundation you build, the cooler giant medieval castle you can build on top of it. So I would say get out there and meet as many people as possible. Try, if you can, to work on stuff. The work that you do influences the future work that you're probably going to be offered. So, don't chase just the thing that's paying you more money. Do the thing that you're excited about, and you would be excited to work on that type of project moving forward in the future.
Amazing. And lastly, is there anything specific that someone who might be wanting to join the Art Directors Guild would need to know in applying?
The Art Directors Guild is easier to get into than some of the other unions. In that, I would say don't join until you're ready to join. And, I would join if you're starting to get offered union production design or art directing gigs, and you're losing out on work because you haven't joined the union yet. A mistake that I've seen people make, and I've heard people talk about this, is this feeling that they joined the union too soon. They were on a gig, it flipped, they got their 30 days, they were eligible to join. They joined, but they weren't getting any work. And the union doesn't necessarily help you get the work. They're there to support you once you're getting the work already. So I would say that, don't worry about trying to get in. I would say worry about building up your reputation, building up your resume, and you'll be able to join the union. They're very happy to have you when you're ready, but put in the work before plunking down your initiation fee.
Excellent. Well, Jason, those are all the questions we have for you. The insight and information you've given us is just invaluable. So thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
If you're looking for more interviews or deep dives into the StudioBinder software, be sure to like and subscribe to be notified when new videos are added. I'm Brandon with StudioBinder Academy. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.